After 9/11, I developed a strategy to protect the country that came to be known as the Bush Doctrine. After 9/11, I developed a strategy to protect the country that came to be known as the Bush Doctrine. First, make no distinction between the terrorists and the nations that harbor them, and hold both to account. Second, take the fight to the enemy overseas before they can attack us again here at home. Third, confront threats before they fully materialize. And fourth, advance liberty and hope as an alternative to the enemy's ideology of repression and fear. I'm just going to read a couple excerpts of decision points by George W. Bush when he talks about Hamas and Palestine. You had the famous 2006 parliamentary elections where you had the majority of Hamas was actually elected. 6 months before I took office, the Camp David peace talks between the Israelis and Palestinians fell apart. President Clinton had worked tirelessly to bring together Israeli Prime Minister Ehud Barak and Palestinian leader Yasser Arafat. Barak made a generous offer to turn over most of the West Bank and Gaza, two territories with majority Palestinian populations that were occupied by Israeli forces and dotted with Israeli settlements. Arafat turned him down. I don't blame President Clinton for the failure at Camp David or the violence that followed. I blame Arafat. Let's see, there's Ariel Sharon. He was a minister in the cabinet of Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. Ariel Sharon subscribed to the Greater Israel policy, which rejected territorial concessions. He knew every inch of the land, and it didn't sound like he intended to give any of it back. This is very much the same shit that we're dealing with today. The two-state solution is Palestine on one side, Israel on the other, but Netanyahu believes in a Greater Israel policy, which means they get to keep Gaza. They get to keep the West Bank in spite of all the brown-skinned Muslims who are living on that property. Here our country was only 9 miles wide, Sharon said at another point, referring to the distance between the 1967 borders and the sea. We got driveways longer than that in Texas, I later joked. I was struck by Israel's vulnerability in a hostile neighborhood. Ever since President Harry Truman defied his Secretary of State by recognizing Israel in 1948, America had been the Jewish state's best friend. I came away convinced that we had a responsibility to keep the relationship strong. I was appalled by the violence and loss of life on both sides, but I refused to accept the moral equivalence between Palestinian suicide attacks on innocent civilians and Israeli military actions intended to protect their people. My views came into sharper focus after 9/11. If the United States had the right to defend itself and prevent future attacks, other democracies had those rights too. Arafat had lied to me. I never trusted him again. Isn't that rich? George W. isn't going to lie to Arafat, even though he had lied. Hey, don't you lie to me. You lie to me once, I can never trust you. Didn't he lie a whole bunch of time about the WMDs? In fact, I never spoke to him again. By the spring of 2002, I had concluded that peace would not be possible with Arafat in power. So let's see, how many times did W. Bush lie about WMDs? Intelligence failure. No, really, George W. Bush lied about the WMDs. It was like 100 times, 200 times. It was like 500 times. He just kept lying over and over. He's got him. He's got him. It's going to be a nuclear, it's going to be a mushroom cloud. He's got him. We got the Niger. The yellow cake is going through Niger. It doesn't say exactly how many times. There was something else I was wanting to look up too, but we'll get back to that. Oh, let's take a look at the Palestinian numbers. So it's 50,000 people officially, 200 to 300,000 when you add starvation and disease. So how many Palestinians have died since October 7th? Not been killed, but died, right? So Israel, Gaza, and maps and charters. So we'll just kind of read through. Al Jazeera is reporting October 9th. 2023, no, that's when they posted the thing, but it's saying 40,000. Here we're saying surpassed 30,000, 502, 34. Let's see, we'll just say Gaza death toll, because that seems to be Gaza death toll, 2024. Okay, here we go. The Lancet is saying 9% of the total population in the Gaza Strip, 9%. You had what, 2 or 3% that died in the Civil War. That's America's most bloodiest conflict. A report from February 7th, 2024 said that the direct death toll was 28,000. And so that means right now it's between 58,260 and 85,750 by August 6, 2024. So 58,000, 85,000. I've heard that it's, 200, 100, 200, 300,000 I've even heard. And Anadula and Gaza death toll tops 39,600 amid relentless Israeli attacks. 39,653 as Israel kills 30 more Palestinians. Hezbollah drones strike Israel. 12 killed in Israeli raids on the West Bank. Gaza toll could exceed 186,000, Lancet study says. Gaza death toll. So 38,000, 50,000, 100,000. We're eventually going to start, what was that, Stalin's quote? If you kill one person, that's a tragedy. If you kill a million, it's a statistic. So that's Rich, Mr. I've lied about, WMDs 500 times. Mr. I lied about WMDs 500 times. Arafat lied to me, and I don't like to be lied to. When will the pig leave Ramallah, said the Crown Prince Abdullah. This is April 25th, 2002. Clearly, the Saudi ruler was not happy with Ariel Sharon ever since President Franklin Roosevelt met with Saudi Arabia's founder, King Abdul Aziz, aboard the USS Quincy in 1945. America's relationship with the kingdom has been one of our most critical. Well, they're the ones that committed 9/11. Why would we go against our ally? I mean, we love the Saudi Arabian leaderships. Why would we go against our friend, our ally, even if they just killed 3,000 Americans and we have to kill 1 million Iraqis and invade Afghanistan and thwart our civil liberties? And Sunni Arab nation sits on a fifth of the world's oil and has tremendous influence among Muslims as the guardian of the holy mosque at Mecca and Medina. I had invited Crown Prince Abdullah, one of Abdul Aziz's 36 sons, to our ranch in Crawford. Abdul Aziz has 36 sons. Holy crap. You know, Elon Musk has like 12 kids. Let's take a look at this Crown Prince Abdullah. Who is this guy? Is it the same guy now still in there? No, there's somebody else now, right? Abdullah of Saudi Arabia. He was king and prime minister until his death 2015. So who is the leader of Saudi Arabia now? So that's Mohammed bin Salman. Mohammed bin Salman Al-Saud. Okay, so let's carry on, right? So we got this Crown Prince Abdullah. Sharon had announced that he would build a security barrier separating the Israeli communities from the Palestinians in the West Bank. The fence was widely condemned. By the time Crown Prince Abdullah arrived at our ranch, his peace plan had been shelved. He was angered by the violence, furious with Sharon, and then soon learned frustrated with me. Eventually, they're going to win Crown Prince Abdullah back, and how? A lone hen turkey is what's going to bring him back. Then we reached a remote part of the property. A lone hen turkey was standing in the road. I stopped the truck. The bird stayed put. What is that? The Crown Prince asked. I told him it was a turkey. Benjamin Franklin loved the turkey so much he wanted it to be America's national bird, I said. Suddenly, I felt the Crown Prince's hand grab my arm. My brother, he said, it's a sign from Allah. This is a good omen. As I thought more about the turmoil in the Middle East, I concluded that the fundamental problem was the lack of freedom in the Palestinian territories. With no state, Palestinians lacked their rightful place in the world. With no voice in their future, Palestinians were ripe for recruiting by extremists, and with no legitimately elected Palestinian leader committed to fighting terror, the Israelis had no reliable partner for peace. I believe the solution was a democratic Palestinian state, led by elected officials who would answer to their people, reject terror, and pursue peace with Israel. I would be the first president to publicly call for a Palestinian state as a matter of policy. The idea sparked controversy starting in my administration, while Condi and Steve Hadley supported it. Dick Cheney, Don Rumsfeld, and Colin Powell all told me that I shouldn't give the speech. Worried that calling for a new Palestinian leadership would embarrass Arafat and reduce the chance for a negotiated settlement. I understood the risk, but I was convinced that a democratic Palestinian state and a new Palestinian leadership were the only way to forge a lasting peace. My vision is two states living side by side in peace and security, I said in the Rose Garden on June 24th, 2002. There is simply no way to achieve that peace until all parties fight terror. I call on the Palestinian people to elect new leaders, leaders not compromised by terror. I call upon them to build a practicing democracy based on tolerance and liberty. If the Palestinian people actively pursue these goals, America and the world will actively support their efforts. Colin took the lead in hammering out a detailed plan to move from my speech to a Palestinian state called the Roadmap. It included 3 phases. First, Palestinians would stop terrorist attacks, fight corruption, reform their political system, and hold democratic elections. In return, Israel would withdraw from unauthorized settlements. In the second phase, the two sides would begin direct negotiations, leading to the creation of a provisional Palestinian state. In the third phase, the Palestinians and Israelis would resolve the most complicated issues, including the status of Jerusalem, the rights of Palestinian refugees, and permanent borders. Arab nations would support the negotiations and establish normal relations with Israel. Mohammed Dahlan, the Palestinian security chief, liked to remind people where he had learned to speak fluent Hebrew in the Israeli jails. Ariel Sharon made clear at Aqaba and later in his landmark Herzliya speech that he had abandoned the Greater Israel policy, an enormous breakthrough. It is in Israel's interest not to govern the Palestinians, but for the Palestinians to govern themselves in their own state, he said at Aqaba. In April 2004, Ariel Sharon came to Washington to brief me on a historic decision. He planned to withdraw from Israel's settlements in Gaza and parts of the northern West Bank. As a father of the settlement movement, it would be agonizing for him to tell Israeli families that they had to leave their homes. But his bold move achieved 2 important goals. It extricated Israel from the costly occupation of Gaza, and by returning territory to Palestinian control, it served as a down payment on a future state. Well, again, given West Bank and Gaza to Palestine, 2-state solution, knock it off with the Greater Israel policy. The prospect of a Hamas victory understandably unnerved the Israelis. I supported the elections. America could not be in the position of endorsing elections only when we liked the projected outcome. I knew the election would be just one step on the journey to democracy. Whoever won would inherit the responsibilities of governing, building roads and schools, enforcing the rule of law, and developing the institutions of a civil society. If they performed well, they would be reelected. If not, the people would have a chance to change their minds. Whatever the outcome, free and fair elections revealed the truth. On January 25th, 2006, the truth was that Palestinians were tired of Fatah's corruption. Hamas won 74 of 132 seats. January 25th, 2006, Hamas won 74 of 132 seats. So they got the majority. Some interpreted the results as a setback for peace. I wasn't so sure. Hamas had run on a platform of clean government and efficient public services, not war with Israel. Hamas also benefited from Fatah's poorly run campaign. Fatah often ran multiple candidates for the same seat, which split the party vote. The election made clear that Fatah had to modernize its party. It also forced a decision within Hamas. Would Hamas fulfill its promise to govern as a legitimate party, or would it just revert to violence? With my approval, Condi quietly oversaw a separate channel of talks directly between Abbas and Olmert. The dialogue culminated in a secret proposal from Olmert to Abbas. His offer would have returned the vast majority of the territory in the West Bank and Gaza to the Palestinians, accepted the construction of a tunnel connecting the 2 Palestinian territories, allowed a limited number of Palestinian refugees to return to Israel, established Jerusalem as a joint capital of both Israel and Palestine, and entrusted control of the holy sites to a panel of non-political elders. 8 years earlier, I had taken office during a raging intifada, with Yasser Arafat running the Palestinian Authority, Israeli leaders committed to a Greater Israel policy, and Arab nations complaining from the sidelines. By the time I left, the Palestinians had a president and prime minister who rejected terrorism. The Israelis had withdrawn from some settlements and supported a two-state solution, and Arab nations were playing an active role in the peace process. He mentioned something about the Cedar Revolution, Lebanon. The triumph of democracy in Lebanon came 2 months after the free elections in Iraq and the election of President Abbas in the Palestinian territories. So, what other statistic I got? Not only has there been 50,000 people killed to 100 to 200, 300,000, but you have the displacement. There's 2 million people in Palestine, and I read the statistic 1.9 has been displaced. Well, you had 9% of the people that's been killed. 1 out of 10 Palestinians have been killed. 1 out of every 10 Palestinians have been killed. Mostly children. I've lost a puppy before, and it absolutely destroyed me. It absolutely broke my heart. Could you imagine actually losing a son or a daughter? And they're innocent. What the hell can you say a baby did to anybody? You can't say anything. And since 1.9 million Palestinians have been displaced, that means every single Palestinian has at least had to move one spot to another spot. Not only is he bombing schools and churches, and churches, the press, hospitals, he's also bombing the United Nations camps. They have refugee camps. You got Israel, Netanyahu even bombing those camps. And now there's going to be possibly a greater war between Israel and Iran. Why? Because Israel struck a guy that they said was Hamas inside of Iran. So they broke Iranian territory, so now Iran is going to do some kind of proportionate response, right? You bomb one of us, we bomb one of them, and then they do this sort of tit for tat. But it's minor and small. But these little tiny bullshit things could get bigger and bigger. So that's 2 things. Let's see. I think I have another note here. Both Moses and Jesus, they were born during the time of the massacre of the innocents. Pharaoh had ordered the massacre of the innocents with Moses. Kill all the Hebrew boys 2 and under, Pharaoh said. And then Moses comes back with the 10 plagues, and then I think the 10th plague, Pharaoh says the firstborn is going to get killed. King Herod also had a massacre of the innocents in Bethlehem. Some people say it was like 1,000 people killed, but some say it was like 10 to 20. Bethlehem was a small, tiny little hamlet at the time. How big is Bethlehem today? You know Bethlehem is in Palestine? Bethlehem today. Bethlehem, Wikipedia, it's a city, and they're saying that there's 28,591. The biblical birthplace of Jesus, it's a major Christian pilgrimage destination. The birth is marked by an inlaid silver star in a grotto under the 6th century Church of the Nativity, which shares Manger Square with the 15th century Church of St. Catherine and the 1860 Mosque of Omar. Christmas. Christians embark on a pilgrimage to the Church of the Nativity, revered as the location of the Nativity of Jesus. A possible first mention of Bethlehem is in the Amarna correspondence of ancient Egypt, Sumerian revolts, Byzantine Empire. It was rebuilt by Justinian I. Israeli West Bank barrier. While it was historically a city of Arab Christians, Bethlehem now has a majority of Arab Muslims. While it is still home to a significant population of Palestinian Christians, this community has dwindled significantly, around 86% in 1950 to about 10% in 2020. Presently, Bethlehem has become encircled by dozens of Israeli settlements, which significantly hinder the ability of Palestinians in the city to openly access their land and livelihoods, which has contributed to the exodus of Palestinians. Nativity of Jesus is documented in the biblical Gospels of Luke and Matthew. The 2 accounts agree that Jesus was born in Bethlehem, Judea, and that his mother Mary was engaged to a man named Joseph, who descended from King David and was not his biological father. His birth was a virgin birth caused by divine intervention. Hey, who's the Father? Nobody. What do you mean nobody? I mean God. The Father, the God, the Holy Spirit, the Allah. Some scholars do not see the 2 canonical gospel nativity stories as historically factual, since they present clashing accounts and irreconcilable genealogies. The secular history of the time does not synchronize with the narratives of the birth and early childhood of Jesus in the two Gospels. Some view the question of his veracity as secondary, given that Gospels were primarily written as theological documents rather than chronological timelines. The Nativity is the basis for the Christian holiday of Christmas and plays a major role in the Christian liturgical year. Many Christians traditionally display small manger scenes depicting the Nativity within or outside of their homes, or attend nativity plays or Christmas pageants, focusing on the nativity cycle in the Bible. Christmas season, the artistic depiction of the Nativity has been an important subject for Christian artists. Humility of Jesus, Lord and Master, the Magi, the wise men. Only Matthew has the wise men, the Star of Bethlehem, Herod's plot, the massacre of the innocents, and the flight into Egypt. In Matthew, the angel speaks to Joseph, while Luke has one speaking to Mary. Well, who did the damn angel speak to? Was it Mary or was it Joseph? They don't really agree on a bunch of things. So Luke and Matthew, they're disagreeing all over the place. Joseph dominates Matthew's and Mary dominates Luke's, although the suggestion that one derives from Joseph and the other from Mary is no more than a pious deduction. Matthew implies that Joseph already had his home in Bethlehem, while Luke states that he lived in Nazareth. Only Luke has a story surrounding the birth of John the Baptist, the census of Quirinius, and the adoration of the shepherds, the presentation in the temple on the 8th day. Only Matthew has the wise men, the Star of Bethlehem, Herod's plot, the massacre of the innocents, and the flight into Egypt. Magi. What are the Magi? They're just smart. They just look at the stars and they're magicians. Two itineraries are quite different. According to Matthew, the Holy Family begins in Bethlehem, moves to Egypt following the birth, settles MC Abdul. And then there was that UFC fighter, Muhammad something. Muhammad Halal. So you had that UFC fighter, and then you also had MC Abdul. Maybe he's the new Jesus. Maybe he's the new Joseph. You got to massacre the innocents. How could anybody order the massacre of the innocents? Well, I guess 1 million people were killed in Iraq. 200,000 have been killed in Palestine. Apparently, Israel, Netanyahu, Bush, the United States of America, Babylon. These are the Roman Empire. These are the people that would order a massacre of the innocents. The two accounts cannot be harmonized into a single coherent narrative or traced to the same Q source, leading scholars to classify them as a special Matthew and a special Luke. Comparison between the nativity narratives in the Gospels of Luke and Matthew, just different. They're just different. No Magi in one, and then there is Magi in the other. Massacre of the innocents in one, but none. Death of Herod in one and not the other. And then they return from Egypt, but they actually return home to Nazareth. They go to Egypt, they come back from Egypt, or was it Nazareth? So many conflicting accounts. It's like, what the hell? Who are the Magi in Christianity? The biblical Magi, also known as the three wise men, three kings, three Magi, are distinguished foreigners who visit Jesus after his birth, bearing gifts of gold, frankincense, and myrrh. In homage to him, they are commemorated on the feast day of Epiphany, sometimes called Three Kings Day, and commonly appear in the nativity celebrations of Christmas. The Magi appear solely in the Gospel of Matthew, which states that they came from the east to worship the one who has been born King of the Jews. Their names, origins, appearances, and exact number are unmentioned and derived from the inferences or traditions of later Christians. In Western Christianity, they're usually assumed to have been three in number, corresponding with each gift. In Eastern Christianity, especially in the Syriac churches, they've often numbered 12. Then Jesus was visited by 12 magicians. Likewise, the Magi's social status is never stated. Some of them say they're astrologers. They were increasingly identified as kings beginning from at least the 3rd century, most likely based on the Christian interpretations of Old Testament prophecies that the Messiah would be worshipped by kings. The mystery of the Magi's identity and background, combined with their theological significance, has made them prominent figures within the Christian tradition. They're venerated as saints or even martyrs in many Christians' communities, and they're subject of numerous artworks, legends, customs. Both secular and Christian observers have noted that the Magi popularly serve as a canvas for various ideas, symbols, creative interpretations. Most scholars regard the Magi as legendary rather than historical figures.